Welcome, everyone. My name is Damaris Gutierrez, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I would like to welcome you to my session for today on creating a relaxed alertness for recent arrival. I'm so thankful to be here at the the ML Summit today. All right, y'all. I'm sorry about that. I practiced and everything was going, and I had another window open. I could hear myself. So, we are going to get back to my session. And so, thank you for your patience if you are streaming in live with me today. This is my first time doing this live. So, thank you so much to the organizers for the ML Institute. They really guided us through this. I'm so excited for today. But again, I want to reintroduce myself. My name is Damaris Gutierrez. My pronouns are she, her. And I have the pleasure of presenting today about creating a relaxed state of alertness for your recent arrivals. I am a nationally board certified teacher in English as a new language, and I serve as an elementary bilingual ESL specialist here in San Antonio, Texas. And previously, I was a former elementary newcomer ESL teacher, which I absolutely love. My students are the reason why I continue to do this work today. And so I'm so excited to share this space with everyone as we jump into my session. All right, so story time. I don't like to think of myself as a storyteller, but I know in education, us, we know the power of stories. So here is just a quick story that really influenced today's session. So for me, I really find inspiration all around me all the time. And a lot of times the people that I have the pleasure of working with or my students, they really inspire me and they may not even know it. And so I think about, I have a colleague who is near and dear to my heart. And I would always hear her say that the kids are finally ready to learn. And she serves as a newcomer teacher as well. And it really struck me at first as a weird statement. Like, what do you mean kids are ready to learn? Aren't all kids ready to learn? But as she would talk further about her kids being ready to learn, what she was meaning is that for her recent arrivals, they had transitioned into the school system. They were understanding the routine. They were really engaged in the lesson and just present. And so, for me, I'm all about, words really matter. And especially when we are talking about children or in conversation with our colleagues. And so when we say things such as, well, the kids are finally ready to learn, what we are meaning is that our children are able to receive the lessons because there are other barriers that we have removed from it. And so when we think about students, we always position them from the richness. We always position them from the amazing abilities that they bring as they enter first day into our doors. And we do this through our words and our actions. And so I really love the book by Zaretta Hammond, which is called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. And this was actually a previous read for the ML Book Club chat a few years ago. And that's how I got introduced to this book. So always remember the power of your social network, especially on Twitter, will help you to continue your own personalized learning experiences. But her session 100% influenced the title of today. And so in her book, she really discusses about how we can use brain science to really be culturally responsive teachers. That means that we are able to support our students in becoming independent learners. And we do this by utilizing the richness that children bring and recreate learning experiences that really tap into all of our children's abilities. And so that is where this session title comes from, of creating a state of relaxed alertness for your recent arrival. And so I would be remiss if I don't discuss with us today, as we enter our new school year, is that it's so key that we acknowledge the past year that everyone has experienced across the world, but especially in our education system, from our children and to our staff, because we are entering these spaces with different emotions. We have different nerves. The news every day continues to make us feel like we're in this cycle of, their schools safe? Will schools be safe for us? And it can feel overwhelming, especially I work with younger kids, so processing through those emotions, they have yet to possibly develop certain skills, right? And so I bring this up to say is that on top of that, we have our recent arrivals, and they show up and they're like, I'm new here, which I love this children's book. And so that's an additional layer that our children are navigating through. And so when we are entering our schools today, you know, there's been lots of conversation about reimagining schools, and we would be remiss if we're not approaching it from a holistic lens, right? So we are getting at the academic and the social, emotional needs of our students. So in Zaretta Hammond's book, she talks about the amygdala hijack. And so what she means by that is that in our brains, we are in this active state of stress and fear. So we have this anxiety that we are going through. And when we do that, our bodies are releasing a stress hormone called cortisol. And so this hormone is going to literally block our thinking rationale. It's going to temporarily reduce the capacity of our working memory, and it's going to make our learning more difficult. So I go back to my friend, and she was saying, man, the kids are just not ready to learn. And then later, yes, now they really are. And what she was really meaning is that, again, our children are entering our classrooms with different stressors and different needs. And it does literally physiologically make it harder for our children to learn. And so what we can focus on is what is in our locus of control, right? What can we control inside of our classroom? And one way that we can do that is by creating this relaxed alertness for our students. So what does that mean, right? It means that we are creating this optimal learning state for the brain. And that means that there's going to be low threat. And in our world, we know we need to lower that affective filter so that our children are able to pay attention with anticipation, they are engaged. Also, this term really applies to the emotional tone of a classroom. That means that we are creating a space that is social and intellectually safe for our students. So you're probably wondering, okay, this sounds really great, really inspiring. How do I do this? How do I do this? So I'm just going to give some very simple ways that we can do this, but the overarching is, again, we want to make sure that, again, our children are feeling social and intellectually safe. And this can apply to all of our students, not only just our recent arrivals that are in our classrooms. So again, we have our new recent arrivals, and I can just picture some of my students' first days showing up at the door and how their little eyes, they were in anticipation, but also in fear. And so I have to think about how can we create a state of relaxed alertness for my recent arrivals. And Doretta Hammond gives us some really inspiring words all throughout her book, but I really love this quote that she had. She says, if we're going to push dependent learners to positive ways to stress themselves, then we have to offer them a safe community to do that in. And so again, when our students are arriving dependent on their skill sets, they may be more dependent on the teacher to support them. When our overarching goal is to move students to become independent learners, and we can do this gradually, we can do this safely for our kiddos. So one way that I'm going to discuss today that we can do this is by co-constructing a classroom space. And so the key words here is co-constructing. I remember my first few years of teaching, this is my space and my students are entering into my space, but really it should be, we share this space and we can co-construct that space together. And so I remember spending hours going on Pinterest. Oh, I need to have my classroom looking this way or that way. I spent so much time doing that and also trying to develop my routines. And the reason why I bring this up is because the school year is amongst us. We are getting ready to be in classrooms, I know in my state, in a few weeks. And so this is a great time to really reflect. We are all are reflective practitioners on what are ways that we can continue to empower and support our students. And so one way to do this that we're thinking about is Doretta Hammond talks about ethos versus artifacts. So again, there's a tendency that we can get stuck on how to decorate the room with the right cultural artifacts. We're like, I see this bulletin board because my children are from around the world. Let me put that up because that's going to be meaningful to them. Rather than, we really have to focus on really having those right ethos to set the social and emotional tone in our classroom. So how do we want children to really experience their time inside of our classroom, inside of these walls that we create? And so in her book, she talks about the classroom aesthetics and symbols. So as I mentioned, I'm no longer in the classroom. And as a reflective practitioner, I'm like, man, how could I have been a better teacher, right? How can I shown up better for my students? And so I just think about some of the concepts that she presents, and she discusses how we have to think carefully about the visuals that we display. Like, do they affirm our students? Do they validate our students? Do they build a sense of belonging? And you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to guess. Your classroom doesn't have to be ready when your kids enter. That's the power of co-constructing that space with them, because it becomes meaningful. They're doing it with you. You're not doing to them, right? And so she discusses that we can find authentic elements to do this. So discussing, talking with your students, finding out more about them, and what are some of those prints that you can incorporate into your classroom? What is some artwork that you can learn from families? And that artwork can just be their simple pictures or your children's own drawings that they have. What are those colors and textures you see your children come to school with? Or if you have the privilege of visiting your children's communities and go within the communities and you see the rich and vibrance that exists there, how can I include those elements into my classroom? But also very naturalistic elements. And we're thinking deeply about the power and calmness of water or the sounds of the wind. What are ways that I can incorporate that into my classroom? So I have these pictures here. I had children who were from Eritrea or from Rwanda, and these woven baskets. My husband's from Eritrea, and so I've seen these baskets anytime I visit my in-laws. And what are ways I could have incorporated that into my classroom? Ask questions. Tell me more about this. Can you share what is the purpose of the woven baskets and the different geometric shapes that exist within there? Or my students who love to come to school, we had a parade of nations, and in these pictures you see some of my former students who are from Afghanistan and Malaysia. What are ways that we can incorporate that into our classroom? Because again, stay curious. We want our children to stay curious. As teachers, how can we stay curious about the richness of our children that we serve? And so I share this to say, when I reflect back on being in the classroom, right, I could have entered differently by really having shared ownership of that space with my students. And they can really co-construct and bring in rich elements or artifacts that support the social emotional well-being, because what I would love for us to do with that is the power of show and tell, the power of storytelling. And this supports our students' oral language development, which is coming from Growing Language and Literacy. Love this book. If you don't have it, must have. Okay. And so I think about my state's English language proficiency standards, and we really want our students to express their ideas, their feelings. This can be in a single word, this can be in short phrases. So if I think about my recent arrivals, I'm going to accommodate and give them sentence frame, sentence stem. I can also allow my students to share in their native language. Again, I have so many students who, again, we're a community who would support their friends, especially if they came from the same, they had this shared language. And this would be an opportunity for my students to serve as interpreters for their friends. And again, that really demonstrates just the power of, or the richness that our students have who are multilingual. And so when I was a kid, I remember we had show and tell, right? I was so excited to bring something from home and share it with my peers and with my teachers. And what are ways that we can do that? And this can become those artifacts in our classrooms. This can be a part of us co-constructing our space. And so I invite you, as you enter into your classrooms, if you're doing this virtually, what are ways that if we're creating our virtual classroom, if we're, how can we include different artifacts that really resonate with our students? How can we hold space for our students to show and tell, and to bring in those elements of themselves? And so when we do this, lastly, I just want to share this because all of our children, again, are not empty vessels. They are full of such cultural capital and funds of knowledge. And so we really need to capitalize that in our classrooms. And we do that. And when we do that, we are building trust, we're building relationships, we're affirming who they are. So the next piece I want to discuss with you is our culturally responsive literature. And so for me, I am a mother and I love books. And so I love reading with my own children, and I love reading with the children in my classroom. And so when we think about culturally responsive literature, I'm going to just center these two concepts, right? Like, we are going to bring in these stories, these books, to affirm our students. So affirm from two lenses: affirm to affirm who they are, who their identities are, but also to affirm and demonstrate to them that we care. And we care about them. We care about their well-being. And so I love this book of All Are Welcome. Anyone that enters my classroom, all are welcome. And so we can do this through books, we can do this through our messaging. The other is to validate their stories, validate their experiences that they may see reflected in a story that we're going to read with them. So again, if we have our recent arrivals, bringing in those literatures, the children literature that reflects some of their experiences. It's not going to reflect all their experiences, but it may or may not reflect some of their experiences. And so I would be remiss not to bring in Dr. Bishop's work. We see it everywhere, but it's so important that we cite the important people who are doing this work, especially those who are from marginalized communities. And so we really want to center and uplift those who are from Black, Indigenous, people of color. And so she has coined this concept of, we want books to serve as a mirror where children see themselves and their stories reflected. But we also want to bring in books that are windows. And so that brings in the stories of others into our spaces, so our students continue to learn and see the humanity of others. right? And then sliding glass doors, we know that books are going to allow them to like physically enter into those spaces. And what are ways that we can do that inside of our classrooms? And so this is really important because as we know that there are children who are underrepresented in books and they continue to be marginalized through books. So it's really important for us as professionals to be critical of the books that we bring in to make sure that they are demonstrating the richness of our students. We're positioning them from an asset and not from stereotypical ways. And so again, these are just again important ways that we can do this, and it's important that we understand these concepts. And so again, I know this seems like a lot of theory, but what does this look like in practice? That's probably what you're like, Harris, come on, get to that. So this is just one way that I like to discuss how we can do this. And so again, the asset mindset is not saying, oh, my kids, they don't have background knowledge. No, they do. They have tons. They have tons of knowledge. And so we're working with the knowledge that they have, right? We are meeting students where they are, and we continue to build upon and not position them as an empty vessel. And so how we do this is through different ways. So this is inspired by, again, the growing language and literacy. So there's three ways that we can do this. So number one, we need to assess what background knowledge do students have. And so as I mentioned, that we can do this as we are developing our lessons utilizing culturally responsive children's literature. I really love this book, Maybe Something Beautiful. And so again, our children come from rich communities or live within rich communities. And so what are ways that we can continue to affirm and to reflect on those spaces that they live within? And so in this book, there's a little girl, and she feels like her neighborhood is really great, but we need to add some vibrance to it. So she organizes and creates murals with her community. And so when we think about murals, I like to find out, well, what do students know about neighborhoods? What do they know about murals? How can they relate? And so we want to find this out. We can co-construct this KWL chart with our students. And so again, the key is co-construct, because if we're working with our newcomers, right, we want to provide those appropriate scaffolds that they need in order to engage in grade appropriate content. And so we want to know, what do they know about neighborhoods, murals, what do they want to know, right? And so again, as you progress through your lesson, you're going to return back to this, and this will become an anchor to their learning. We know that after we have read our book together, we are going to document what have we learned. And I like the S because it continues us to reflect on what is something else I would like to know more about. So this is just one way that we can assess our students' background knowledge by utilizing the KWL, and so what they know and what they want to know. We can also activate their background knowledge. So again, we are living in a world where we are more comfortable with incorporating technology into our lessons, and we know that that really supports our students. And so we can bring in knowledge and skills that are needed for the new learning to happen in the forefront. So this can be in a video clip. And we can bring in a video clip about neighborhoods, about mural designs. I live in San Antonio, Texas. And so there are certain parts of our city that have beautiful murals. I can find interviews by the muralists who have designed this for their community and their why behind it. The other part that we can do as well, we can continue. So we've assessed, we have activated their background knowledge through our read aloud, but we can also build on what they previously know. And so this is a way to bridge some gaps that you've identified while you've engaged through this. So this is a great way to do a research experience. We have Zoom or any other virtual platform that you utilize. We can interview experts. We can have our students co-construct questions together and interview those within the community who have created murals. And so again, we're bridging this connection. We're utilizing our culturally responsive text in order to engage children in grade appropriate learning experiences. So again, we are doing the academic and the social emotional because we're bringing in culturally relevant text, but we're also are utilizing different strategies that can support our students as they are learning. So this is just one way. I just really love that when we think about building background knowledge, or we are positioning students from the richness and the funds of knowledge that they are bringing, so we can assess, we can activate, and we can build upon what they already know instead of saying they don't have background knowledge, right? So I shared all of this today. I know it was really fast, but I think we have to get rooted in our why. Why would we create a relaxed alertness? And so the reason why we are doing this, again, because we want to make sure our students feel socially and intellectually safe. So again, we can co-construct the classroom space with our students throughout the year. And these are ways that we can develop their oral language, which is vital for our recent arrivals. We can select culturally responsive literature. And ways that we can do that is working with our students' background knowledge that they bring into our classroom. So I want to close out by really saying I had the opportunity to attend and be a panelist at the EduColor Summit, and we had our National Teacher of the Year, which is Juliana Octubre, and she is also a National Board Certified Teacher, and her story is amazing. If you haven't heard of her, don't know her story, please go check her out. But she was a bilingual teacher, a bilingual special education teacher. And her messaging when she closed this out yesterday is that we have to really have our classrooms as a holistic learning that really meets the academic and social emotional needs of all of our students. And so again, as we are working with our recent arrivals, as they're entering our classrooms this coming up year, whether that's in person and virtually, how are we making sure that we are doing both, right? And it's not in isolation. You know, social emotional learning time is not just this one block of time. It happens throughout your day because we really have to work with our students, because our goal as culturally responsive teachers is to support our dependent learners to become independent learners. Okay, and so that's how we continue to empower our students in our classroom. So again, I thank you all for tuning in with me today. I'm sorry about the beginner technical difficulties. I practiced and I just had this window open, but as I shared, this was a pleasure. I love the multilingual language summit. It is such a rich experience that is self-paced. You can always go back to it. So I thank you all for tuning in with me today. Please reach out. My Twitter handle is there. You can reach me. And so thank you so much. I will, if there are any questions, I will respond to them and put them on my page, which would be linked here for you all to come back and view. So thank you again for this time. I appreciate it.